Have you heard the good news? It's The Sopranos Podcast, Season 6, Part 1, Episode 4, Postage Stamp. You're part of something bigger. That's a quote from Tony Soprano, yes, the Tony Soprano we know and love, in this Season 6, Part 1, Episode 4 of The Sopranos, entitled The Fleshy Part of the Thigh. This episode is written by Diane Frolov and Andrew Schneider. It was directed by Alan Taylor. Fleshy part of the thigh. This is an interesting piece of drama, is it not, guys? This is a more reflective hour, a philosophical hour, a funny hour, all the kinds of things we've come to expect from a Sopranos episode. But we have a diminished yet recovering Tony, beautiful lighting, and the way this episode moves and looks. I like so much of it. I'm Chris D'Amato.
I'm Paul Mancini.
And I'm Jordan Hugh.
And yeah, give me your first initial impressions of the fleshy part of the thigh.
Yeah, so it seems to be this is kind of the philosophical heart of the season, perhaps, though it's a little, I don't want to say muddy. I kind of mean that in the better sense. I think this episode is specific in a way, but it's also vague in a way that is great. I'll try to get more specific. We have long been with the philosophy in this series that is Livia's philosophy, which is a philosophy of nihilism, which, to paraphrase her, is that basically you're alone, you die in your own arms, and no one's going to be there for you, and it's all a big nothing, right? And now here in this episode, both from our Mr. Schwinn character, but from Tony's own realizations, the OBG was saying the great wind that carries you across the sky, seems to be saying, well, no, here's something that is the antithesis to that, and something that's more positive. It's not all nothing. It's instead maybe all everything, and you're a part of that everything. I'll just give it away now. We titled the episode Postage Stamp from the quote referencing the fact that in all history of life on the planet, human beings would only be a postage stamp on the tip of the Empire State Building. That was the ratio that was suggested. And you could take that to make you feel really small, but instead you could also take that as being like, wow, we're part of this great big thing, and our own trials and tribulations don't really matter in the grand scheme. But then the show does some really interesting things with the source of that philosophy too. So it's really rich and rewarding to think about. This is an episode I've thought about a lot after watching, in a way that not every episode of The Sopranos makes me think a long, long time afterward.
Everything is everything. I'm down with that. Paul?
Thank you, Deluxe.
I'm down with that too. Well said, the big nothing versus the big everything. While watching this episode this time around, knowing that we would record on it, I did think of it in some ways as a sister episode to D-Girl, in particular, Livia's notion of it's all a big nothing, and is it instead that there is a certain insignificance, but it's not that it's not so nihilistic. It's rather everything is everything, as Deluxe puts it. And I feel that way too. I'm fascinated by it. It's a compelling episode in terms of those themes. As Chris, you said, it's a very funny episode. A couple episodes ago when we did Join the Club, Jordan mentioned that a hospital, not unlike the coma world, not unlike a hotel, is a soft place, an in-between place, a place in which you are not quite yourself and neither is anybody else. And Tony, good writing here, very early on, he says, I feel like not myself. And as if that wasn't enough of an indication, he's sharing something fairly intimate with a total stranger, the nurse. And Tony in this space, I'd argue, is unusually subject to and unusually open to encounters with strangers. That's how he comes to be open to this different philosophical approach. It's a fascinating place to find Tony in. And as Jordan just laid out for us, it's a fascinating thematic framework for the episode. And that's not even getting to Paulie Walnut's storyline. And hoo boy, are we going to have a lot to talk about there.
My God.
Yeah. We can finally address a comment we got in an email a few seasons ago. We'll get to it. But Yeah, this is a hell of an episode. I love the performances here because you're dealing with the Bobby thing, which is funny and ridiculous, but part of the bigger picture, right? He's trying to be a better earner after what Tony says to him, and he shoots a guy in the ass. It's great, but but then you're just going on this strange journey with Tony, and I got to say, first of all, it's as a viewer, I'm happy to see that Tony is seeming of sound mind. That we were worried about brain damage and what he was going to look like coming out of this. Yes, he's in rough shape. He sounds terrible. He looks terrible. He pukes blood. He has all this crazy shit happening. He can barely stand on his feet during his meeting with Phil. But Gandolfini manages this late into the show to still show us something new, something completely different, a different dimension. And that's what it takes to be a series lead in a show like this is the ability 6, 7, 8 years in to still show us something new. And I thought that this the Tony in this episode was not quite himself, but certainly more familiar than the Tony we saw in the coma. So
Yeah, and also weirdly, yeah, not himself, but also kind of in a good way, not himself, right?
mm,
That's I mean, just when I think I can't see anything more from this character, it's like, oh, and there's the glimmer of redemption on the horizon there too.
yeah, well, and that's a great thing you just said, Jordan. You touched on something I was definitely going to mention at some point this episode, which is this feels like it could be not looking ahead, not using any prior knowledge of what's to come. This could be a traumatic enough event to be a redemptive or changing thing in Tony's life. So it leaves you on that oddly hopeful note that even though, yes, he tries to shake down an ambulance driver, a paramedic, uh, he, he also finds a way to get beyond that petty bullshit and just enjoy his yard and give sound advice to multiple characters throughout the episode. Uh, so yeah, I'm excited to see. Not only was it exciting to watch in and of itself, but it leaves you excited for what we're going to come out of as Tony recovers and what we're going to see out of this main character following this event. I remember when I first watched this episode, I left wanting to. I'm like, man, I can't wait till he's back with Melfi. I want to see Tony back with Melfi now. But
Yeah, for
anyway,
sure.
let's.
This is the bait and switch of the whole show. Jordan mentioned earlier this is like a philosophical heart of the season. Tony could be changing for real. Do we want him to? Now, when we've seen him in therapy, that's the basis of the show. Of course, we want him to get better. Do we want him to not be our creature of the id anymore? Will that be less interesting to watch? Again, there's vague elements here. And some people that I've read about don't like this episode because of moving too slow, maybe because of the philosophical nature of it. It was the essence of why I loved it, why I've been so excited to talk to you guys about it, about the question of change, and is that what we want? Can he really do it? It's all up in the air at the end of this episode. I'm leaning in. I'm so fascinated by it.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
in the success of the episode does hinge largely on a lot of new characters because we're in this transient place, right? We got Deluxe, we got Schwinn, we got the rapper that Bobby's doing business with, who I don't think we get a name on. I didn't check the credits, but
We get Barone's son.
Yeah, and then Jason Barone. So let's break it down. We start the episode on an interesting image here. This fish man outside the scuba store. I don't even think they really explain what Paulie is doing here.
So bizarre.
I think they just got this shot and liked it. Although there is a reference made later on by Bob Prooster about the big fish. Bob Prooster being another big character. And there's no bigger fish in the gangster pond if you're looking for bottom feeders than Paulie Walnuts, as we will as we will see.
I think Paulie's picking up those snug
the snug socks,
the slippers,
snug socks for his aunt, quote unquote, Dottie. And that image of the scuba gear, I don't know, the fish man is maybe some reference to evolution, but certainly the breathing apparatus made me think of what Jason uses later on. Of course, how John Schwinn ends up breathing through the tubes.
Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
This nurse is closing Tony up, and we get this shot of the Ojibwe saying, which we got at the end of the last episode. Let's talk about the Ojibwe saying. We're going to touch back on it a few more times here in the episode. Who put that up? And Tony says Janice, which we find out later is an assumption. Janice denies putting the Ojibwe saying up there. What do we make of the Ojibwe saying? It's used throughout the episode, and do you have a theory?
Well, first, and keep in mind, I'm not as well versed in the series as either of you or many of our listeners. Um, I hope we never find out who put that there because I love the little, it's almost like a little supernatural wink of like this other thing going on. Because there is this, no, again, I could be reading this incorrectly, but like we seem to be doing like a Western versus Eastern thing on the show in terms of like philosophies that are presented. I am not a philosophical scholar at all. I'm not a theologian, listeners, so please don't hold me to anything that I'm saying that's incorrect. But it seems to be the majority of non-Western religions all embrace something that isn't so rooted in things that are sort of diametrically opposed to each other, right? Western religion, especially Christianity, very much rooted in condemnation, rotting in hell for eternity, purgatory, things like that, things that are very punitive, right? Eastern religions seem to be about being one with something, one with nature, one with each other. That is what nirvana is all about. That is what many of the Buddhist teachings are all about. We had our Buddhist friends in previous episodes this season. The Ojibwe saying seems to be more of that. I sometimes I go about and pity for myself seems to say to me, hey, sometimes I'm too focused on the individual, on me, myself. And I don't realize that all the while I'm living my stupid little life. There's all this beauty and this magnanimous great spirit is just blowing me and indeed all of us across the sky. And that's something Tony is coming to in the same way that his self sessions with Melfi have brought him greater awareness of himself. This saying and his exposure to a little bit of Eastern philosophy has brought him greater awareness of the world around him. We're seeing a common man's mind being expanded in this series, and this is Chase's new path of expansion. Tony, you learned so much more about yourself. Now it's time to think about the whole world, and what are your thoughts on that? So, yeah, I hope we never find out who put it there. I'm glad it wasn't Janice because she would have meant it in a cynical way. And I don't think Tony is taking it cynically, which is delightful to watch.
Beautiful. We meet rapper Deluxe, or at least hear about him as he passes in the hallway. I like this character. And I like his scenes later on in the episode. We find out he was shot 7 times. He's still got all his pancreas, though. And then Tony gives this line that Paul referenced earlier, where he tells the nurse he hasn't been feeling like himself, which of course is pretty normal for someone who's come out of a coma, but it has extra meaning for us because we just saw what he went through. And Jordan gave an excellent soliloquy in our last episode about the Lethe and the idea of Tony coming out changed or different or having left something there. And I think it's possible he even took something back with him from this journey. So this was an interesting moment here with the nurse. I liked it. His reaction, he's thinking of Melfi when she says you should talk to somebody, social worker.
I was waiting for him to say, I have someone, but I guess that's the great writing. It leaves it to us to fill in the blank, right?
Right, so. Yes. And this is cute. Carmela comes back in. It's nice to see a smile on her face. It's been a hellish few episodes for Carmela, so it's nice that she gets she gets a little bit of an emotional break this week.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cute. She brings him this little book on dinosaurs and this great, of course, evolution being a subject of conversation, this great shot of the close-up of the dinosaurs fading into the birds over the Barone sanitation.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. Okay. Like in Jurassic Park.
Exactly. That they evolved into...
They do move in herds.
That's a great flick. I just watched that recently, man. That movie holds up.
I love it. It remains probably in like my top favorite films. You know what I love, I think, the most about Jurassic Park after all these years of watching it? It's not even so much that it's held up or that it's a great Spielbergian classic. Um, it's that I really keep forgetting how unlikely the heroes are in that movie.
Hmm.
Like Alan Grant, like I love Sam Neill. Shouldn't work as like the movie's like main character, like hero character. Like he's not that guy. And like
Yeah.
look at anything else he's played, he's like not that guy, but he is so that guy. Like I think they initially maybe this is apocryphal, but they were talking like, oh, maybe Harrison Ford for that role, but Harrison would be so wrong because
Hmm.
you look at Harrison and he's like, oh yeah, well clearly that guy's the hero. Alan Grant seems like he's just as likely to get bitten off of a toilet bowl as the other guy. It's really cool that he's the hero of that movie. I love that movie. That's a great film.
I concur. I full-throated endorsement of Jurassic Park. Getting back to The Sopranos, we are.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, no, this shows. You know what? We're in season 6. We're showing our audience that we have skills outside of this material. So maybe, who knows? Maybe we do Spielberg movies.
Jurassic Park podcast. I'm all in.
We meet Jason Barone. We found out in episode 1 of this season that Dick Barone died of Lou Gehrig's disease. That whole exchange they had during Ray Curto's funeral. Man, oh man, he's making a big mistake right off the bat. He's going over the books. We're paying a consultant, and Anthony Soprano, and then we get Paulie Walnuts. That picture of Paulie is fucking fantastic. That
so funny. What a good sight gag.
So he's we're just touching down on this. He's going to be around figuring out. It's looking like he's going through the books after his dad died, and Tony Soprano, I know him. Great, I'm sure this will go well. Janice and Bobby hanging out with Tony, talking. Notice that and this is a recurring thing throughout the episode. Now that Tony is out of imminent danger, Janice is much more detached and disinterested. She can't make a big opera out of the current situation, so she's much more withdrawn than she was. The Janice we saw barely able to compose herself. That's my brother. She denies putting up the Ojibwe saying, and Tony's making cracks about the choo-choo train. You got a train that brings your food to you. He's having some more surgery tomorrow. They're going to close him back up. And Bobby says, look, I'm sorry about what happened with Junior, and we've heard this rhetoric from Tony before for Livia. Don't mention Junior to me ever again. He shuts that down right away, and he fucking means it. And then he lays it out to Bobby. Listen, you're an okay guy, but each and every man will be judged on his own merit. You can't lean on this. You can't lean on this brother-in-law shit forever. And then, my God, if there was any character before I saw this episode that I would lay a bet that we would never see again, it would be Aaron Arkaway, the narcoleptic born-again Christian.
What a good bring back.
Everything about this is good. It's
so good.
The fact that he says, "Have you heard the good news?" off camera, and so you're like, "What?" You register it before you see him, and then, boy, do you see him. The Terry Schiavo Vigil shirt, the sign, "Womb is God's," the fucking sunscreen on the nose, just all of it.
Lord.
I've seen this guy before in life. It's
Sure.
unbelievable. They fucking. Aaron Arkaway. You know, it's weird though. I don't hate him. I can't hate Aaron Arkaway. There's something kind of
because he's very sweet.
Yeah.
He's wrong, but very sweet. I just love what a good bring back. We haven't seen him since season 3.
Yeah.
I think, and unless I'm mistaken, I'm Chris. Maybe you plan to get into this later. These are 2 writers that we haven't seen on this show before, right?
It's possible. You know, I wanted to look into that.
I didn't recognize the writers, and I thought, are these Sopranos super fans who were like, what would be fucking wild? Bring back Aaron Arkaway.
I thought for sure that Diane Frolov has definitely never written one, but I feel like I've seen Andrew Schneider's name on something before, if not another Sopranos episode.
Okay,
then
I don't know
something.
these. I don't know these writers at all, but I thought maybe
Yeah.
like, oh, we're bringing in some new blood for the last couple seasons here. But I was like, oh, they loved Aaron Arkaway, connected with them.
Yeah. So Aaron is oddly likable despite I don't know everything about him. And however, I have to give The Sopranos credit. I have to give these writers and the showrunners credit. They introduce a man of the cloth, a religious man who is somehow more hateable than Father Phil.
They really do. Yep. And you see Phil for like 2 seconds in this episode, Father Intentolop, and for that moment you're like, oh yeah, I miss him. He is preferable to this guy.
Bob Brewster, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, Pastor Bob.
Bob Brewster. Thank you.
Who has the face of the devil.
Yeah, where did they find this guy? It looks like they went into a mega church and said to the pastor, like, you're coming with us.
Yeah, he's so a little too real.
I agree with you guys. Aaron is this perfect. It's such a great bring back. I laugh every time. Yeah, he is a sweetheart and he's an extremist. As the pastor is. The Terry Schiavo thing is hilarious. That's a very topical bit from that time frame. This is during the Bush administration when evangelicals were enjoying some greater political influence.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me, particularly because the Sopranos, as people as part of this subculture, are what I would call social conservatives. Tony underlines that he doesn't agree with these guys on a lot of things. He actually has always, I think, looked at the world in some different ways, even though he puts on certain airs as a religious person. And as Jordan laid out earlier in this episode, we're going to kind of frame a discussion between Western thought and Eastern thought. I'm not saying that all Christianity is like this guy, God forbid, but he has this extreme and very simplistic, frankly, point of view. Remember, evolution and salvation are mutually exclusive, but nothing's mutually exclusive if everything is everything. Right. So it's very funny and fun, of course, as it usually is on The Sopranos, but it's laying out some really profound and deep themes as well.
Yeah.
That was great, Paul. Really great, especially because those of us who know Paul know that he was addicted to cocaine and strippers.
You've been to the Bing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic line, and in the actor's delivery, no, with the smile. Of course, he's been to the fucking Bing. Yeah, he knows exactly what it is. My favorite little comedic moment that I laugh about every fucking time is the little when Bob Brewster's telling his story about his salvation and how he got in the accident. He was hanging by his seatbelt, and then you just at some point after one of it, and then he came in. Praise him. That little Aaron Arkaway's praise him in the background fucking ruins me every time. Every time I'll lean into one of I watched this episode for the first time with a friend of the show, Lewis, and we whisper in each other's ears all the time. Praise him. This is something we say to each other regularly. It's Aaron Arkaway, man. Anyway, Bob Brewster is here. He's sharing the good news. He's Tony makes that bottom feeding, huh? Well, that's where the big fish are. This is also another thing that I don't know why this might be. I guess I could go into a whole theory as to why this is the case, but there have been some noteworthy gangsters who have either gone in witness protection or who have left the mob and have pursued other interests, and they really embrace the born again thing. I guess it's because you commit so many grievous acts as a gangster that the good parts of Christianity are the idea of salvation and washing away the bad and embracing the good. So I think it's a natural way for somebody who's done a lot of terrible shit to reconcile with that and find a new phase of life. But
I think for gangsters in particular, being born again Christian makes sense. I mean, the majority of mobsters in particular are Catholic to begin with. Many criminals are Catholic to begin with, or Christian to begin with. And gangsters have that. They have omerta. They have a code. They understand what it means to follow a certain path in life and not stray from it. So that has made sense to me.
It's an easy joke to make, so I apologize. But later, the guy brings Tony, the pastor brings Tony this book on Chuck Colson, who worked for Nixon, and politician. Saying a politician / gangster is almost a redundancy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yep. Tony starts kind of poking at him. They pray for him, first of all. Prayer, they've done studies. Prayed for patients have 11% fewer complications. And of course, the confidence with which he just states things like what God wants is for you to have a relationship with him directly. Well, how the fuck do you know? You're acting as an intermediary by simply being here. But anyway, Tony starts kind of poking at him a little bit, having a little fun with this Viagra scenario, and we get the pro-life bit, which is the Viagra won't be a problem. It's the morning after pill because it strikes at life, et cetera, and so forth. An interesting little conversation to be had on The Sopranos. But I like when he eventually leaves and Carmela has that look at him like, what are you, wise ass? It's a cute moment.
Tony also being like, yeah, shockingly like not very conservative in his views in this conversation. It was very interesting because he's more alluding to like, hey, these laws are in place because of power and control, not because of God. Like
right.
Viagra because we live in a male-dominated society. Of course, men would always have body autonomy. Yeah,
to speak to this new Tony, I mean, he's not, as Paul said, he's definitely somebody you would encounter in society and think that's a socially conservative guy. He's not going to go for the latest, trend in LGBTQ framework dialogue. He's not going to be one of these people who's out there picketing an oil company. But throughout this episode, we see him, I don't know, standing up for women's reproductive rights in this scene. We see him advocating or at least, virtue signaling toward Katrina victims. It's funny. It is an interesting
It is
mix.
Funny. Also, he's not a boob. He can't just be like blindly shepherded into the flock. That's not who he is.
And that's exactly where I was going, Jordan, is the fact that Tony, whatever anybody thinks of, this is not my opinion of religion. Tony would views people like this as marks, as suckers, as people who are just like blindly following something. He sees himself above that. That's how he views it, in my opinion. So he's having himself a little fun here. Speaking of fun, I got to tell you, this was a gut laugh the first time I saw it. This little scene with the surgery, the Jimmy Hoffa line. Good God.
Oh, Plepler.
What yeah, that totally redeemed Plepler for me. It's an asshole thing to do, but man, oh man, that's just funny. That is just funny. Jason Barone comes in. We find out more about him. He goes back with Tony, brings up a memory of Shea Stadium, and Paulie's in there. He's a ski instructor. We're going to note that for later. And he wants to sell the business to a Mr. Cinelli, who we find out later is, quote, John Sacramoni's waste management consultant. Hearing Paulie Walnuts talk about an EBITDA is a moment I treasure forever. Do you even know what your EBITDA is? It's great. But Tony lays it out in a pretty diplomatic way. The carton business is, quote, a different corporate culture. And Jason is going to learn that very soon. But he's trying to get this kid to not sell. That's the point. Next scene, Aunt Dottie. What a bombshell for Paulie. Paulie's having quite a season so far, by the way.
Yeah.
This is just the Mayhem was a huge Paulie episode. Join the Club had some great Paulie moments, and now this is like one of the main thrusts of the entire thing. Brings her some slippers. I love the little germaphobe, hypochondriac Paulie being skeeved out by the legs and the trying to cover him up, but she's hot. She starts telling this story about the USO and this soldier Russ. Paulie says, "Hey, Dottie, if this is Gomer, I think maybe you should talk to a priest." But she drops a huge bomb. And this first of all, this news would be traumatic for anybody to find out at his age. Like, Paulie is old to find this out, first of all. And then the fact that it's Paulie. It's the gangster. It's the gangster who loves his mom more than anybody else. And we also love Nucci. We know how much Paulie and Nucci means to Paulie. It's sort of like how Johnny Sack is one of the only gangsters who doesn't cheat on his wife. It's sort of like that. Right. It's like it's like, and Bobby didn't cheat on Karen. It's like that. There's a special relationship. So you can see immediately that this is just absolutely gut wrenching for Paulie to find out.
Yeah. This makes him question, who am I? Right. He gives him an identity crisis. And, at first, I think a viewer could be quick to judge Paulie and say, how could you be angry with Nucci? This is the woman that raised you. That's still your mother. I was what I found myself saying to the screen. And then reflecting back, I'm like, I kind of give him a pass. That's all he has is his mother, really.
Yeah.
He's the one of the only guys not married, no kids. He's made worship of his mother in a very similar to Tony way, kind of his whole thing. And now that's been taken away. This guy has very few tenets that keep him anchored to life. It's basically organized crime, the capital F family, right? And his mom. That's it. So taking any of that away really puts him out.
I agree. I think a few seasons ago when Paulie kills the old woman, he smothers her at the end of season 4, and then just goes back to business. Jordan said, this guy has no lasting trauma. And it's true. For the most part, like, Paulie, for much of this show, has been the guy, you ever think nothing good was ever going to happen to you? Yeah, and nothing did. And he just keeps going. Maybe this was like the one way to get to him, because as Jordan said, it's too big a plank. Yes. He doesn't have much else.
Yes.
Now, here's the fun part, I think. I think this is actually what separates The Sopranos from a lot of other really good shows. In any other show, this scene wouldn't be hilarious. In this show, it is. The stuff with, it could be our first veiled reference to the title, the fleshy part of the thigh that he's skeeved out by her legs being exposed.
Wow, didn't even think of that.
And he says, oh, it's too warm. And she says, oh, I'm burning up. Is she anticipating hell because she was a bad girl?
Wow.
I don't know. Then at the end, again, the scene could be very well written and well done and advance the plot, but it would end with her saying, Maria Nucci is your aunt. I'm your ma. And then Paulie's reaction. Not on the fucking Sopranos. On the Sopranos, it cuts to a wide with Paulie looking like a dipshit and her saying again, I was a bad girl. That's why the Sopranos is so great, because this dude, Paulie Walnut's life just exploded in front of him, and I'm laughing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always funny in different ways. For example, this next scene where which I just call the wallet biopsy scene. My only note that I wrote for this scene is the American healthcare system is too savage and predatory for Tony Soprano. That's it.
Well said, Chris. Also, this woman is shapely, she's good looking, and she's white. She comes in and Tony says, oh, where they been hiding you? For a minute there, it looked like United Colors of Bennington. He's got an Asian doctor. At least one of his nurses is black. So again, are we separate, or is everything? Because a minute ago he was opening up to the black nurse. Then he's happy to see this white woman. Turns out she's predatory. Later, Tony is he's commiserating with Katrina victims who are mostly black. So I think we're pulled in some different directions here.
This moment where Tony's out and he's sitting outside of Deluxe's room is great. Another hard belly laugh. He just keeps saying, I know, but it really hurts. And how this the shooting is going to give him and you know, to help with your street cred because you had a job all those years, which is fantastic. I'm surprised this actor didn't get more credit. Oh man, what the hell's? Hold on, I'm gonna take a quick second. I can edit out the pause.
This is the actor playing Deluxe.
No, well, I could look up the actor playing Deluxe, but I actually noticed something about the other actor in the room that doesn't. I don't think he says anything, or maybe he's talking and we don't really see him. It's the other black guy in the room talking to him, but I recognized him from another HBO show. I think this is Craig O'Neill Grant, which is who played Poet in Oz.
Oh, okay, sure.
I thought he did a really good work on that.
I didn't recognize him. He was
he doesn't have. I didn't even. You hear him talking. I think he has a line or two in this scene where Tony's sitting outside the room, and then I didn't recognize who it was until I saw him in the room where they're watching the fight later on in the episode. And we get a shot of him one time. I'm like, oh shit, that's Poet from Oz. And I actually, this is the first time I've noticed him in there. Good actor. I'm surprised he didn't, have more to do here, but can't give everybody a million lines. And oh, poor Nucci. Paulie, I won $40 at Keno. Ow. And Paulie just fucking lets her have it. And I have the same reaction you did, Jordan, which is, Jesus Christ, this woman. I had the same.
Yeah, she raised you. Like, how dare you?
Yeah. So I definitely feel for her here. But I said this. I found myself when Lily mentioned, we were watching it together last night, and Lily mentioned, man, I hate how what he does to Nucci. And I said, yeah, but like, also, the fucking guy has a right to be hurt by this. I don't know. It's a tough situation. He does.
I think the reaction is understandable, and ultimately it's sort of smoothed over in the end. But I totally get the reaction. Again, I mostly sympathize because again, she is all he has, and he feels betrayed, and I understand.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. It's something that it's powerful. It's even relatable in finding out something maybe not this devastating, but something that disappoints you where you find out your parents are human beings. It's more relatable for someone like Paulie. That said, Paulie in this scene actually says the words out loud, "Forget who gets victimized." I mean, I don't know what else to say, guys. Like that, as if that's so ridiculous. That's what these guys do for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind, even as we note that Tony perhaps really does want to make changes. It's one thing to speak in that language. It's another thing to live it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool little scene here, dipping back into the music business. Bobby comes up on this other rapper who Deluxe is producing his album, and Bobby is like, "Oh, you're writing a song, huh? I wondered how it was done."
Yeah, this guy's rapping does not sound particularly good, but
it's not.
I was like, I don't see a future for this guy.
Yeah. No, he's not going to have no major release this year, and maybe we're all better for it.
Yes.
But Bobby encounters him later on, a scene later outside the hospital where he offers to shoot him. I'm a marksman, fleshy part of the thigh.
I'm a marksman, destroyed me. I'm a marksman.
And raise your profile with X-Lax. Excellent malaprop. Bobby is a marksman. That was great delivery.
Something easy, the fleshy part of the thigh.
Yeah.
There ain't no easy. Not with these guys.
Yeah. Nope. I like Paul's interpretation with the leg better because I could not believe this little C plot got the title.
Yeah, though, it's almost it pushes the bounds of plausibility, but you know what? In the end they sold it. I think they sold this to me.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I bought it.
There's a couple of things throughout the episode too. Remember that dinosaur book that Carmela got Tony a bit earlier when Jason Barone came in? Meadow was reading to Tony from the book and said that fossils of dinosaurs found that soft tissue connected dinosaurs to birds later on through evolution. So the soft tissue, that fleshy quality, perhaps is something related to what Jordan said at the top. Everything is everything. Could it all be connected? I don't know.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, well said. Vito is reading Men's Health, which I love for.
Oh, Vito.
Well, what's funny about that though? It obviously there's the joke we know something that everyone else doesn't, which is that he's closeted gay man. So he's enjoying the magazine on a different level, but he's losing weight. And so it's plausible that somebody who's actively trying to exercise and eat right would be reading this. It's
Right.
great. Silvio with the fucking inhaler, he's completely his whole status from the previous episode is diminished. He's just hanging out here,
Yeah.
using his inhaler, looking miserable. And then an interesting callback to the Buddhist monks in the Kevin Finnerty sequence. Tony's watching the show and he has this vexed look on his face. Something about it is registering a feeling with him. I used to watch this show all the time as a kid. Just
more Eastern imagery, philosophy, something. Chase is putting it all out there. It's in orbit.
And then we meet when Tony goes out for a little walk with his IV. We meet this character played by Hal Holbrook, who wonderful character actor.
Amazing. And
this performance is really special for me. I love what he does in this episode. I really like this character. But we meet John Schwinn, foot soldier at Bell Labs, who's cutting farts like sonic booms.
We were having a discussion earlier today, the three of us, I wouldn't call it the pre-show. This is just in the evergreen group chat of the Sopranos podcast, that Hal Holbrook in this episode, because of the style of his hair and the mustache, does really resemble author Kurt Vonnegut. And then a lot of what he espouses in this episode, both the humor he has as well as the philosophy, is very Vonnegut-esque. I wouldn't be surprised if that was purposeful, though it's obviously never stated outright. I mean, first of all, what a delight to just see completely legendary actor Hal Holbrook on the show. One of the biggest names we've ever seen on the show.
Yes.
And totally just kills a one episode performance. Just amazing character. And a source of new philosophy for us.
Yes. Vonnegut is one of my favorite authors. If he hadn't been a novelist, he probably would have been an engineer. He probably would have worked at General Electric his whole life. This is a great thing about The Sopranos, how specific it is. Bell Labs is a real place in Cherry Hill or Berkeley Heights in New Jersey. This trauma center is where a guy like this would have ended up. He would have settled in North Jersey. He would have done well for himself. He would have been an eminent scientist to work at that place. That some very important discoveries in the 20th century were made there. So this guy being impressive on that level, it's very real. And it's great. It's a great moment. Again, Tony wants to make friends in his Tony way, but that's what he's doing when he says, "I hope you got some sleep. I was snoring like a son of a bitch." And then the guy reciprocates, and Tony is open to this kind of exchange. And it's fascinating. Again, I don't know for sure. You guys could tell me if I'm reaching here, but this guy has the same initials as Tony's dad. And he's about that age. So is this another figure who's trying to teach us something, show us the way? And then Tony losing that guy's voice at the end is some kind of powerful loss. I don't know. It's profound. It's fun. Hal Holbrook is a legend. It's a joy to see him in this.
Absolutely.
And of course, we find out later in the episode he has cancer. It's a slightly different. It's a different kind of thing than Johnny had, but it's a similar, respiratory sort of issue. So that's interesting,
right? Yeah. Well, certainly significant, and we'll go through this when we're at the end of the episode. But he's just in there for a sinus infection.
Yeah,
and it turns out to be laryngeal cancer. Talk about the cruel wheel of fortune spin on that.
Yeah. But Deluxe rolls by. I love this little Tony Soprano original G, whatever. But I guess he got a CD signed for AJ, and they're invited to come watch the fight in his room. He's got it on satellite, and he rolls off down the hall. We're going to come back to that later. And Tony goes to a meeting with Phil Leotardo. Paulie walks him down there. We find out now that Johnny Sack is the guy behind Mr. Cinelli, and he's buying the company. Tony brings a cigar down just to. I think he was intending to use it to maintain some of his old image of power, but he can barely stomach it. He snuffs it out right away. But he makes it clear he needs to be kept on. He needs that W-2, his insurance. He wants 25% of the price plus skim. And Phil does his best here, I guess, as good as Phil Leotardo can. All due respect, you've been in a coma. All I can do is deliver the message. So, but Paulie gets a call. He's spaced out, and Tony asks him about it in the elevator because he's noticed that Paulie's mind is elsewhere, and his aunt just died. That's what he said. Tony, of course, does some follow-up questions about the nun. Do they have short hair? Paulie clearly doesn't want to talk about it. They really married to Jesus, so I understand. By the way, I did skip this little scene, but we did mention it briefly earlier. The look on Father Phil's face when he approaches Paulie, and he's a lot better shape than those fucking nuns you got up there. Oh man!
Thanks for stopping by, Father Phil.
What a cool role for an actor, by the way. I know it's not a likable character, but the amount of times Father Phil gets called in could be 2 or 3 times a season. That's a nice. As an actor, I would appreciate that role.
Oh, 100%. Just to be like, you're not doing a ton of the heavy lifting. Like once in a while you get a juicy scene or an episode to go on, but like just to be a part of that world. When you think of the Sopranos world, Father Phil is just one of those people that's just like Charmaine and Artie or, just one of these.
A cool role for a working actor. Like not a star, but like you just get to do that. It's so cool.
Yes, I agree. And he does a good job. We always shit on the character, but
to be clear, I love the actor. I just don't like Father Phil.
Tony, following the news of the Wallop biopsy, decides to shake down this fucking paramedic, this poor guy, who Rudy Diaz is his name. He's getting shook down. Tony wants $2K. You owe me $2,000. I don't have that kind of money. 1 week, Rudy Diaz, or you'll need a paramedic. And that little shot when Carmela finally comes in and Chris turns and smiles like a Boy Scout and like nothing odd going on here.
Thanks for visiting.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Carmela comes in and we find out that I guess she and AJ Carmela apologized for the mean thing she said to him last week. He's got a job at Blockbuster.
Oh boy. Yeah, there's just no turning that train around, huh? Yeah, she apologized to me. Okay, well, yeah, the one mean thing she said, which was correct. Okay, she shouldn't have said it, but she was right. And where was your fucking apology, AJ?
Right.
Yeah, Tony says something like, I'm glad you guys like buried the hatchet or whatever, but to Jordan's point, it's kind of hollow. He seems resigned to this is going to be a shit show down the road.
Yeah. Then we're watching the fight in Deluxe's room. This is a great scene. This is a big, like, heart of the episode kind of scene here. I love Paulie. He's just in another mental space. You think you got family, but in the end, they fuck you too.
Very, very Livia, by the way. That's basically what she said.
Absolutely. Yep. In the end, you die in your own arms. Then we get this fascinating conversation about separate entities. It starts with the idea of these two boxers as two oppositional forces. But then John starts talking about Schrodinger's equation. I like when the woman with Deluxe asks if he taught at some middle school nearby, and he's like, he's a rocket scientist, for Christ's sake. The rapper who's getting his album produced, having to constantly shift and hold up the satellite. It's just it's a well-constructed scene. They have this great conversation. He gives this tornado analogy that it's all the wind, but you view them as two separate entities, but it's really all the same thing. Everything is everything. And the great button on the comedic button on the scene. You're so fucking smart. Fix that TV. Anything you want to say about this scene, Schrodinger's equation?
I would mention that I adore. I like this in general in film and television, but when there's a character who is significantly smarter than everyone else in the room, in this case, John Schwinn, and he has to find a way to make the analogy meaningful for the common man around him. And the way he does it is just, I mean, both the writing and Hal Holbrook's delivery. It is so poetic and beautiful and made me, authentically, Jordan, the viewer, want to see the world that way. And of course, we see how it inspires Tony. But just to live a life where it's not a life of forces in opposition. It's not a life of conflict. It is a life of, for lack of a better term, a life of just being carried, of vibing, of going along with everything because everything will be. I think that's really beautiful, and I think he puts it in a great way. It is of course lost on Paulie, who is probably in the darkest moment of his life in this scene. But Paulie is here as a surrogate for Livia. He's here as the surrogate for nihilism. He can't hear this message.
Yeah.
But Tony does.
Yeah, the lingering shot at the end that's nice. There's the bit Paulie says, "You're so smart, fix that TV." And the guy laughs, but Paulie just gives him that death glare and he says, "Okay." And Tony laughs and smiles good-naturedly. But then it lingers on him, reflecting on what Schwinn has just said, which is great. Kurt Vonnegut said once, "We're here on this planet to fart around. Don't let anybody tell you any different." And that's a little bit more crude than what Schwinn says. But yeah, the great wind, it's all carrying us across. It's a very different idea than, as Jordan pointed out, Livia's nihilism. And they wanted to make it stick. And that nice little, it's just a second, but that shot at the end, Tony thinking about it, it's great.
Yeah. Speaking of great, I always love me a Johnny Sack scene. Vince Curatola in the jail, hashing out with Phil. He seems determined. I think this is the only scene we get with John in this episode.
It is, yeah.
I suspect by the title of the next episode, we might get a little more of him soon. But he's essentially sticking to his guns. He's pissed off that Tony's negotiating. He calls him a selfish prick for his counteroffer. Offers 5% of the sales price and will lease him a new car. Keep him on for 2 years. But Johnny is in a tough spot and is not negotiating, in my opinion, in good faith here. I think he's feeling the pinch from the law and is perhaps not working with Tony the way he might have in prior times. Tony, of course, screaming about it. He thinks because I'm in this weakened condition, he can take advantage. Well, he can go fuck himself. Pukes. What a lovely, yeah.
Does it come off as so petty to anyone else? These two are fighting over the scraps of their empire. This is not even. This is not their main source of income. This is, to my understanding, I don't know much about organized crime, really. They're fighting over what is to be the legitimate face of their operations, right? Is that the idea that Barone and Cinelli are this is the sanitation front for everything else we do?
Right. Yes.
I'm sure Tony could put something else together. It's just they choose not to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, his excuse here is that he needs the W-2 and the insurance, the union the insurance that he gets from the job. But I mean, this is a resourceful guy. He's got his feet in a lot of different things.
Right. So this is a lot more about not losing ground, especially not appearing weak.
Well, it's a different corporate culture.
Right.
To Jordan's point, is Tony's body literally telling him you can't stay focused on this petty bullshit? He's getting angrier and angrier and he pukes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great point, Paul. I like that. What a lovely song to move into here from gross puke throat Tony that we got in the previous scene, as Paulie and Patsy, two guys you do not want to see coming toward you with the scowl, with that scowl.
That's a hit team.
Yeah, just two mean old bastards, right? Fantastic shot of them coming down that pier, and we've seen Paulie issue a lot of threats over the course of the show, but there is a much more volatile meanness underneath this one than the ones. Paulie usually is much more. It's a casual thing to threaten somebody for Paulie Walnuts. Like when he's leaving the TV at the coach's house in season 1. I don't know what it is, but the TV stays. It's just like kind of smirking through it. But this one he's got an edge on his voice. Fuck the contract. We expect to be duly compensated. It's coming out of your ass. I'm feeling threatened, as well you should. A man who teaches skiing for a living ought to look after his physical condition, his knees. So pretty goddamn explicit here.
Yeah.
And there's not a fucking thing Jason can do about it. He's trying to back out this little line with the buffet table. I don't think it's just a throwaway. I think it's a great way to just remind you of this woman who's playing Jason's mom in just a quick little touchdown kind of way. And this guy Chinelli is just one of these old school garbage guys. I'm sort of involved in. Again, I like to keep certain parts of my life separate from the podcast.
Got to be careful now.
But I'm involved in some political things in New Jersey, and this guy Chinelli reminds me of some people I've interacted with recently, is what I'll say. So he's just one of these tough, older Jersey garbage guys, and he is just like, nope, not having it from this fucking like millennial son of Dick Barone. Just like, nah, the Barone routes are now Chinelli routes. That's that. Tony Soprano, well, fuck you and fuck him. He's your problem. so
this is what the kid wasn't ready for.
Right.
This kid was brought up at the buffet table at the country club, not making deals with these guys out on the course. That's what they protected him from. And I have to admit, the kid's kind of goofy and can be kind of annoying, but Tony and Paulie try to warn him in these ways that are, it seems like, too subtle. Different corporate culture means mobbed up.
Yeah.
But the kid doesn't know that. He wasn't ready for it. So he's walking into this, and of course he gets mowed over.
Yeah. Yeah. They really, I know, not that they would, but they really needed to tell him, Jason, there are people in this business that will kill you without fucking thinking twice.
Right. Yeah.
They will, please just.
And it's not even just that Chinelli is like an old garbage guy, though that would be enough. Just like old grouchy garbage dude who's not going to take anyone's shit. He's got Johnny Sack behind him. What the fuck is he going to do? Right? This has already been decided in his mind.
Yep. Correct. It's a diminished Tony versus John, all the might of New York's biggest family. Right? It's crazy. Yeah, so Jason's in a real tough spot here, and I found myself, despite the fact that he's abrasive and naive and annoying, I found myself feeling for the spot he currently finds himself in.
Sure. Well, also, much like our poor lawnmower man whose name escapes me, right? These are the normal people that got caught up in the web of corruption that don't even realize how bad the situation is until it's gone too far.
Right. Speaking of innocent people caught up in bad situations, Tony is watching this, just hanging by the room of this little girl, 8 years old, with burns all over her body, just terrible. And Paulie can't register that. That doesn't get through to him in that moment. The week I've had, he says, standing there right after Tony explains what they're looking at.
Well, there's this. The hospital is this place of incredible perspective, but you have to be able to see it, right? Oh, you think it's bad that you got shot in the abdomen and lost part of your pancreas? Do you know what's worse than that? Having your larynx removed, your voice box gone. Hey, you know what's worse than having your voice box gone? Being, and being an older man, being 8 years old and having third-degree burns over 80% of your body, basically never going to recover, right? But you have to come from an enlightened place to look at it that way. Tony's starting to come around to that. The way he's looking into her room is not the way that Tony we are used to would have done that. There is great sorrow and compassion, the type of stuff that Tony usually reserves for animals, not for people. So perhaps he's kind of coming around on people for the first time.
Yeah. Fascinating take, Jordan. Paulie explains to Tony, he finally comes clean with all this. Life's a joke, a big joke on me. I'm not who I am. It's not just about his mother. It's I'm not who I am. Who the hell knows who this Russ bastard is? And I want to mention this. This is actually why there are fans out there. We got an email about this a few months back, and we didn't elaborate. This is why some fans speculate that Russ Fagoli of season 5, who was in the military with Hugh, is potentially Paulie Walnut's father.
I don't think so.
That theory's out there. I'm sure there's more to it, but that's just. I just wanted to mention that that's where that comes from.
I don't think so.
Probably not, but it would be fucking hilarious if he was, because that guy's whole thing was that he was off put by the fact that they were Gavones, and Paulie is the ultimate Gavone.
Yeah.
It would be such a fitting revenge for that kind of sneering asshole.
Right. I guess that works out age-wise, but I don't see it.
But anyway, yeah. There's never any verification or proof of that. It's just internet fan theorizing, but I thought it was just funny and worth mentioning. So while the show remains as exciting, unpredictable, and dynamic as ever, I will say we are at the point in the show, and it's inevitable, where certain patterns are inevitable, and you're going to see them. When you see this random happy-go-lucky father with his son on the garbage truck, the second you see that, you know somebody's going to get badly hurt.
Yes, the show telegraphs. Yes, it does.
There's just no avoiding it.
Poppy. It's sad. I shouldn't laugh, but it's weirdly black comedy funny.
Yeah. They beat this. The Chinelli guys just take the route by force. They beat this poor guy in front of his kid badly. Cave his fucking head in with a pipe in front of his 7-year-old son. So yeah, that's The Sopranos. Cut to this shot of the Ojibwe card while Tony's just sleeping on the bed.
Yeah, that's seen as bleakly comic, and again, even in an episode where we're considering things being connected, let's not forget the upshot of what these guys do and how it operates out in the world. I don't know if this was deliberate, but this shot at the end, the kid runs over, leaning over the dad, Poppy. It really looks to me like the shot where Fredo leans over Don Corleone.
Fredo,
yeah,
yes.
In The Godfather. That seemed deliberate. Now, then also cut to Tony sleeping. Like legit, like he's sleeping through it. And the Ojibwe saying in the foreground. And there's a really nice resonance here. I think that's deliberate. It cuts right from that static shot with the Ojibwe saying to Nucci placing the prayer card, I assume from Dottie's funeral, on the mirror in her room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we get this awful scene with Nucci. I don't mean awful as in it's poorly executed. I mean, I just hate how it makes me feel. Paulie just comes in like a tornado himself and just rips Nucci to shreds. Your goose with the golden eggs. I've always taken care of you, where your real children can start now. I hope she rots in hell. He didn't go to his mother's funeral. Even a rat don't abandon its own children. He throws her fucking TV out the window that he bought her, and they can't resist the laugh, though. That shot of whoever's idea this shot.
The wheelchair going by.
Yeah. Just that still
chair.
shot. The TV falls, a woman goes by, not fucking giving a flying fuck, or even noticing that the TV just. Whoever's idea that shot was. Bravo.
Yeah.
But poor Nucci. This is just sad. I never want. But Paulie's broken too. He's not just angry. Like you hear his voice cracking. I never want to see you again. He's as close to a little boy as we're ever gonna see him in that moment, and he just walks out, and Nucci falls on the bed crying.
Yeah, very sad.
It's not fair. Talk to the Katrina victims about fair. Jason Barone has come back to Tony, and he is just getting excoriated. Paulie's calling him a fucking baby. Crazy. But get him. You're worse than my son. Get him the fuck out of here. So he's learning a hard lesson. And he's not getting any help or comfort from this end of the table. So.
Well, because Jason Barone is laboring under the misapprehension that he lives in a fair society or that he's dealing with fair people. He's not.
Yeah.
He's living in a rigged game, the rigged game of sanitation. And by the end of this episode, I think he'll realize that finally, because it seems like he's been living in a cushioned life too long, life in general is not fair. Okay. It's time for his wheel to turn too. That's this whole episode. This whole episode is while you sleep, someone's getting beaten to death. While you're recovering from your gunshot wound, a little girl is wheeled in with third-degree burns. Okay. Oh, you found out your aunt was your mother and your mother is your aunt. but you're now, a ski instructor who no longer can make the money to pay $4,000 a month to Paulie. Like this is the show. This is the show.
Yeah.
You're the most profound character with the most philosophical, eloquent voice. You get a laryngectomy.
Yeah.
That's this show.
Mhm.
But that's also life.
Yep. Yeah, the Bob Proosters of the world go on in perfect health, and this fucking guy gets his larynx removed. It's unbelievable. 7,000. He shorts Bobby by $1,000, but I guess 7,000 is enough. Just one shot. I don't know. Well, I don't want to know when it's coming.
It's so stupid.
Bobby refers to Dr.
Everything
Droop,
about it.
Dr. Droop or whoever. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to know when it was coming either, though. I don't know. I guess if I was paying someone to shoot me in the fleshy part of the thigh, yeah, fuck. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't do any of this, though, because it's stupid.
It's so stupid.
Then we get
And
this.
I love it that like $7,000, it's like every penny this guy has. Like he couldn't get to $8,000. He spends everything he has for this.
Yeah.
But life is not fair. Life is a joke.
Then we get our scene with the where we got our title reference from, the postage stamp scene. I like Tony's talking about that idea of humans being a postage stamp at the top of the Empire State Building. Chris's delivery of the line, "I don't feel that way," always makes me laugh.
Is that because Tony getting shot is like a humbling experience, and Chris is in this place where he's trying to transcend? So of course he doesn't see himself as small.
Yeah.
He's trying to make himself larger.
Yeah.
I like that reading. Also, I think Chris's mind is just not broad enough to accept anything Tony is saying.
He likes to use the technique of positive visualization, but he's fairly negative a lot of the time.
This is a weird episode to bring up this point now, but I've often really lamented that Tony thinks Chris is the future of the family because he's really dumb. I mean, he is. He's a dumb character.
Well, we've talked about this, and it's part of the hopelessness of the whole situation, I suppose.
Yeah.
The fact that this is the future of the family, but we like Chris on a certain level. But if the show were The Sopranos and Chris was the main character, it wouldn't work. You'd maybe get a season out of it, and then people would, he doesn't have that something that Tony has to sustain.
He doesn't. He's too narrow. He's too shallow. Yeah. Can't do it.
Hesh and his daughter come in. We've Eli, who got hit by the car a few episodes ago. He's in a walker now, so he's recovering. Enter Pastor Bob. Bob Brewster comes on in. Brings the book on Charles Colson. A powerful man who found Jesus. Gives the whole spiel. It's not just about saving you from hell after you die. It's about saving you from yourself while you're still alive. Tony's not being a jerk, but he's politely disagreeing with a lot of the things he's saying. And then, of course, the dinosaur book, my kids can't get enough. And then this is when he just becomes unbearable to me. This shit here with the like the Flintstones, dinosaurs and people lived on the earth at the same time. He's so certain. He's so certain of everything. This guy. So the earth was God made the earth 6,000 years ago. It's in the Bible. I don't know that it is in the Bible, by the way, but that's I've heard that before, but I actually don't know where in the Bible it says that.
I'm not even sure. There are apparently some kind of evangelical, quote unquote, scientists that have actually determined like the day and hour that the universe was created. But I mean, that's all. That's not real science. It's not anything.
Yep. Evolution, which is Satan's plan to deny God.
Sure.
Then that man's not saved. He steps out after, extending the offer to Tony to join him at the church and all that. And Tony is polite enough here, although he fires back and tries to present the other point of view. And Chris's line about the T-Rex in the Garden of Eden, it's great imagery there.
Tony references John Schwinn in the next room. There's a scientist in the next room who would disagree with you. You said his response, of course, that man's not saved, but presenting to the viewer in a universe where John Schwinn is not saved. I'm not sure if I want to live in that universe. Interesting inclusion in this scene is Hesh and his daughter.
Yeah.
I don't really remember what the Israel situation was like in 2004. Obviously, we know what it is like now, and I'm sure we don't want to offer too much comment on it, but I really appreciate Hesh's button on the end of this scene.
Yeah, it is an interesting little moment there, isn't it? Especially because they kind of fade out of it too. It's an odd cut out of it, but
Yeah.
it says a lot about Hesh's character. But I think Hesh is expressing a cynicism. Well, first of all, yeah, go ahead.
It feels oddly both reflective and prescient, though, right? I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. Hesh's daughter, kind of, I don't want to say smooth things over, but acknowledges in the scene, like, conservative Christians have been often allies of Jewish folks because the folks living in Israel are living in the birthplace of Christ. And Hesh's line, I think, at the end of the scene, the button on the scene is, "Just you wait." So as if to say, let's see how long America holds out as an ally. Now, in 2004, or whenever this is, as we acknowledged before, this is the Bush administration. This is as evangelical as we got in recent times. So yeah, friend of the state of Israel, that was totally a thing. 20 years later, we're in a very different climate.
Yeah. No, that's very true.
Yeah, I love the button on the scene as well. I mean, I also love that ostensibly Tony is supposed to be resting, and all of these very difficult to solve world problems, what we might call hot button issues, they're walking into his room and saying, "Look at me." And again, Tony a bit uncharacteristically is like, "Okay, I'll talk about it." Be it questions broadly about abortion, they say striking at life, or problems in the Middle East. I don't know. I don't know if Israel and Palestine presupposes a duality that isn't real. I do like that Hesh talks about how you wait. Again, the Christian conservative allyship with Israel being as perhaps as self-serving as what gangsters do. It's all very fascinating, and it's left kind of hanging out there. But I do like that the show unapologetically just steps right into it and says to Tony, and I think to the audience, take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it also speaks to a kind of old world cynicism of a Jewish person, especially one who is much closer to the Holocaust than his daughter, who's a generation removed from it. But the story of the Jews around the world, I mean, they're a diaspora. They are, they're the idea that it's never a good idea to get too comfortable in one place because eventually the worm turns and you get run out. That's an idea that has been around with the Jewish people for a long time, and I think I really bought that moment from Hesh. But I think it's interesting that they so for all the reasons you both articulated, it's interesting that they put it in there fearlessly and just left it for conversation. This is a great episode for conversation. There's a lot of different things really you can talk. You watch this with a group of friends. You're going to be talking about the themes and the shit in this just for days. We're not even really done yet. There's so much more.
Yeah, and I give a lot of props to Tony because he really does not make those conversations easy for Pastor Bob. It would be a lot easier to just be like, yeah to that guy, but he does challenge him. It's good stuff.
Mr. Wizard. Great line. Goes in there, Tony has a conversation, the last one, unfortunately, with this character, John Schwinn. Brings up the Ojibwe saying, you don't see we're part of something bigger. We're part of a bigger reality, he says. And then Tony really, for the first time in this episode, other than the vague allusion he made to the nurse, really talks about his experience in the coma. I don't remember anything, but I was pulled towards something. And Carmela told me I woke up at one point and said, "Who am I? Where am I going?" And it makes you think about heaven and hell. And I love his response, which was, well, that presupposes a duality of good and evil, opposing entities. You know where I go with that.
Mm.
when Tony mentions Pastor Bob's assessment of his not being saved, he's like, yeah, maybe he's right. And then he drops the bomb that he's been diagnosed with laryngeal cancer. Terrible. And this really sad, funny button on the scene here where he's like, I was thinking you could do me a favor and, whack me. And Tony gives him that kind of sad look, but lets the jokes land and slide for a moment there. But thoughts on this great, very well acted scene between these two, as far as I'm concerned, top shelf actors.
Well, it's a scene that I think contains both valuable dialogue and a potent message, right? John Schwinn is a character of service. He is serving to try to bring Tony into a place of enlightenment. And as we see at the end of the episode, at least for now, it's something that Tony has accepted that perhaps he's part of something bigger and sees it in a positive way. However, I am not sure what Chase is telling us, and if it is simply as obvious as, hey, on this show that wrestles largely with nihilism and existentialism, the one character that espouses a positive viewpoint about all of us being connected and that no one is alone has his voice box removed. I don't know if I want to take that interpretation and be that dark with it, but I think that is what's being suggested. Otherwise, I'm not sure I have much else to say in the scene other than that I feel very much that there is a handoff of a baton here of a being from John Schwinn. Hey, this is what I believed. Take this with you, right? You may need this. This is the wise master in the fable. Take this sword, take this wand, use it how you can. It served me well. Because this is, at least in this show, the end of John Schwinn.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, the wise master and the student, perhaps like the wise master and the student in Kung Fu.
Right.
Yes.
Which Tony watches on the television. Yeah, I like this scene a lot too. It is very well acted. I love that it's kind of a throwaway that Tony doesn't remember the coma world, which we were in for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
So we only have our enigmatic interpolation of what it was. I love that.
Yeah.
And whatever reports Tony got from the doctors and Carmela of what he said when he briefly came out of it. Yeah, and it's also fascinating to me that there is this moment of connection, but then at the end there's that dark joke that the guy makes, and it's fascinating to me that Tony doesn't laugh at it or get angry about it.
Right.
It's more that it seemed in that moment, didn't want to be reminded of that part of his life.
Yeah, that's a great read on that, Paul.
I like it.
Yeah, something about this guy that makes him want to, I don't know, be above it. It's great. Yeah. Tony comes back in. I love terrible, disgusting imagery of Vito taking a dump. Build a jetty with what comes out. But Tony has to finally set Paulie straight. He's going about in pity for himself. Tony drops the quote from the Ojibwe saying, "That woman loved you." I love Tony's reaction when Paulie says, I know by traditional standard you didn't have a great mother. Oh! But Olivia, all her faults didn't abandon you. You got to get beyond this petty bullshit. You're part of something bigger. Tony is immediately employing this philosophy that he has taken to.
And employing it well.
Yeah.
And also, a little bit of self-reflection. Petty bullshit. Maybe I can let this sanitation thing go too. It's all small in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's nothing to do but laugh at this next scene. There's a man dropping 2 big bags of fast food, screaming, "He shot me in my ass. He shot me in my ass." I don't know how else I'm supposed to take that, except
the girl he's with
laughter.
is laughing as well. It's just objectively funny. And I guess the takeaway is that he's actually probably lost some street cred from this because he's shot in the ass.
Yes.
In a ridiculous way.
Yeah, no, there's no way that translates into album sales.
As if that wasn't funny enough, the shot of Bobby scurrying away in the hoodie.
I'm a marksman.
Interesting little moment here. Carmela warning Tony about Paulie and Vito. Vito, especially, is someone you should watch. This is a side of Carmela we don't see often, but I like.
Smart.
Carmela as, like, a little bit of a business partner here. I enjoy this moment quite a bit. Ah, the bird of prey. The insurance lady comes back in. She lets him know that he's going to be going home, and they removed Hal Holbrook's larynx, which you can see the sadness way over Tony. And then Barone's mother comes in with the zucchini and just gives this impassioned emotional monologue about how much she loves Jason and how it would kill her if anything happened to him, and it's not his fault, it's my fault, and we kept him out of the business. And Tony is being much more reassuring of her, but the real crux of the scene is that Paulie is breaking down watching it and can't stay to the point where he actually has to leave the room and go cry in the hallway. A very un-Paulie like move.
Great performance.
Oh yeah, it's weird seeing this out of Tony Sirico. Again, all of these people are showing us such range here. It's really good. But Tony, the other point of this scene is that Tony promises her, yeah, nothing's going to happen to him. So don't worry. You have my word. Tony gave his word. Bobby comes in with the envelope. Had a good week. Tony says, good.
Yeah, inside is the money from the poor guy he shot in the ass.
Yep. He opts not to say goodbye to John Schwinn. What do we make of this choice?
Well, I mean, they said what they had to say. I don't think he wanted to interrupt him while he was convalescing, but also I think out of respect too.
Yeah.
I don't think he wanted to have to see John in his diminished capacity, and I think he wanted to leave their previous meeting as their last one.
I agree, and also, as much as it might have been nice, for whatever sentiment I have, for Tony to create a moment with him, that guy was not especially sentimental. So what would he care?
Right.
You know? Yeah. I agree with Jordan. I think it's left in this space. But like Jordan said, Tony will take it with him, And
another shocking thing, Tony usually does the hypocritical thing, right? That's what we're used to, is Tony saying one thing and doing another. But to his credit, at least for now, he rolls past the paramedic. Paramedic has the money. He's about to hand it to him. Tony lets him off. He's letting go of the petty bullshit. Rolls right past the paramedic outside, and man, oh man, the way they shot this, you can fucking feel his just refreshed, that feeling of getting out of the hospital. It's something that you can only understand if you've spent significant time in a hospital, either with somebody who's in there or faced a really long convalescence. But they shot this on, it looks like a beautiful spring day. Tony's just closing his eyes, feeling the sun, listening to the birds, the kids playing, the traffic. Janice could fucking care less when he takes her hand and professes that each day is a gift. From now on, each day is a gift.
Oh, I think she suspects it may not last. That's how I got. That's how I thought of her reaction there.
And fascinatingly, no one else hears it.
Yeah.
No one else really registers it, right?
Yep. He gets back to the house. He's got his whole bedroom set up. I love this little moment. Again, all his little moments with Carmela. It's just so nice after what she's been through to see her get an easier episode. Hey, Blondie, this is all you, And it's just a sweet little I love you moment. It feels genuine. She accepts it. And then we get the resolution of the negotiation. Again, Tony letting go of the petty. Old Tony might have pushed this through another round of negotiation, maybe even started shutting down construction sites, or who the hell knows what would have happened here. But Tony decides to take 10 years and 12% sales price with no skim. There's enough garbage for everybody. Phil shakes his hand. The deal is done. Great line. Great fucking line. And Phil walks out.
I read a little bit of maybe like some lack of fulfillment from Phil Leotardo. I think he was hoping the situation would escalate, right?
That's interesting.
I thought.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting read.
Because we're all being very clever about this. I think any viewer can see that Filiatardo has, for many episodes now, just been a messenger. This is not a messenger character, right? So he has feelings about these messages he's delivering. There's no way he's over the death of his brother, right? I think he was hoping things would go sour for Tony sooner. So I read disappointment on
Mm.
his face when he hears like, oh, he's not going to fight about it anymore. All right, whatever.
Right. Yeah. That's a valid read.
That's a really good. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's great. Tony's like letting go of the petty bullshit a bit, but does Phil need it?
Yeah, I
Right.
think
Yeah.
Phil needs the conflict, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we go out here and look, the wind was spoken of several times in this episode, and of course the observant viewer has to note that when Tony's laying out by the pool and we're getting the shots of the wind and the trees, it reminds me of the Inn at the Oaks, which is where he came out of the coma. He's taking a piece of that with him. He left the piece of himself in there.
Mhm.
But looking up at the trees and hearing his kids call out, and then looking up at the trees here, again, the interconnectivity of everything is that despite yep.
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead.
then maybe also the long-term parking trees, because we come down on now a very violent scene, right? It seems like the trees are all these scenes.
Yeah. And then, of course, this horrific, violent end. We're not sure where we are at first. We think we're out in Tony's yard, and then we see this little, I don't know what it is. What do you call this fucking thing? A kayak, a canoe, whatever the fuck boat
Yeah,
thing.
basically, yeah.
He's coming down with it. Great shot. Boom. Metal pipe to the knee. And this is just Paulie at his absolute most vicious. This, I don't know. Like, I understood on some level, not that I justify it or think it's in any way okay. I understood on some level why he killed Mini Matrone in the season 4. It's like, I don't want to get caught. This is just pure cruelty for cruelty's fucking sake. And he's taking out his own situation on Jason Barone. Pipe to the knee. Guess what, fucking mama's boy? You're gonna kick up $4,000 to me every week, every month. I don't care if you're in Deer Valley or Death Valley. And if you mention a word about this to Tony, I'll stick this up your ass and pull the trigger till the bullets come out your eyes. Hell of a line.
And he means it.
Oh, he means every fucking word of it. Gives him a last kick, ruin this guy's career. So not only squeezing him for money, but completely takes away any ability he has to go earn it, and walks off with that signature Paulie scowl as the wind circulates, the same wind that's blowing through Tony's yard. And he walks out, combing his hair back, and that's the end of the episode. Final thoughts on this and how it resolves, and any last things you want to say about Fleshy Part of the Thigh? A reflective hour it was.
Yeah, well, final thoughts on that scene. Paulie is the 80%, burn over a little girl's body. It's just totally an unfair scene. It's not justified. It's just pure malice because the universe is malicious, right? It isn't fair, or worse than malicious. It just doesn't care. It just isn't a compassionate universe. The only little light there in that scene is that I guess he wants the $4,000. That's a very specific number, right? To keep his mother Nucci, but yes, his mother in the deluxe nursing home in Green Grove where she is right now. So it will go to keep her there, but it won't necessarily restore his love for her. That situation has changed forever, and he's ruined this young man's life. But he doesn't care, and nor do I think we will probably touch down on that character again. I'm just guessing. That's it. I mean, that's the universe, right? You owe me $4,000 a month, but I've just taken away your primary ability to earn that money, right? Or maybe I've put your relationship with your mother in jeopardy because you thought the sale of this company was going to pay for her in her retirement and all that stuff, because that's what he was most concerned with, his own mother. Not fair. In terms of final thoughts on the episode, I actually really have shared them throughout our recording today. So I guess the only thing I would share in wrap up is the hope and the wonder and the positivity that Tony has at the end of this episode. I wish he could choose this path and stay on it. I just think we live in the Sopranos world, in our world, too cruel and too malicious a universe for that to play out in that way. Tony Soprano can't be John Schwinn. But it is nice that he listened.
Well said. Again, I'm such a mark for Kurt Vonnegut. What he said was, "Welcome to Earth, my babies. Here's the most important thing I can tell you. God damn it, you've got to be kind." And I often think of that. And I try to be kind. I could be kinder. And Tony, as Jordan mentioned, is expanding something and some vision in this episode. He makes room. And even if it's in small ways, I am encouraged by it, by his listening to John Schwinn and that sort of thing. That said, as you guys have both articulated, this episode does not shy away from a lot of those brutal elements. Every crisis is an opportunity, as Tony is experiencing. And Paulie's crisis would also be an opportunity, possibly, to change and grow. Paulie's only outlet ends up being brutality. In both of these storylines, the one about Baron's sanitation and in the very silly one about Marvin, Deluxe's underling, the gangsters set out, at least ostensibly, to quote-unquote help somebody. Even if it's ultimately self-service, they're saying, I'm going to help you out. You should get shot. Or let's deal with how to operate this business. Jason, I don't want to see you get hurt. But even if the gangsters setting out saying they're going to help you, one way or the other, you end up getting it in the ass. And that's the reality of this world and the way these guys operate. As Jordan said, you're sleeping and then some guy's getting beaten. And at the end, yeah, it's nice that Tony is enjoying his yard, but the world spins on. It's nice that you can speak in a language about about the wind carrying you across the sky, or a language of merit to Bobby. But whether tragedy or farce facilitates the envelope he brings you, as long as the envelope isn't light, you're fine. So again, how sustainable is this change really? Open question, fascinating, adore this episode. You guys are fucking brilliant, by the way. Love
You're
talking
brilliant
to you about this.
You too,
Thank
Paul.
you.
I second everything you guys said, and I love this episode. The thing is, we talked a lot about Eastern and Western philosophy, this idea of opposing dualities or everything is everything. And when I initially watched this episode, and again, we're no spoilers, so I'm not even going to vaguely hint. I'm just using the knowledge I've been given up to this point. There's a part of me leaving this episode hopeful. There's positive change coming out of Tony. There's new stuff coming out of Tony. There is something different about this Tony. It's definitely the Tony that we knew before the coma, but different. It's not the Kevin Finnerty. It's a newer Tony who has been through something and has taken something from John Schwinn, a very wise and likable new character for Tony. But here's the thing. If you really think about the philosophical implications of this, Tony, as a gangster, this is an American story. This is not set in the East. This is set very much in the West. We've said from episode 1, this is a story about the American man, the gangster, and that's the story that we're telling. And in that setting, Tony will function actually in the long term much better if there's a concept of good and evil and if there's separate entities, because then there's always somebody to pound on, somebody to shoot, somebody to rob, somebody to extort. But if everything is everything, then that kid's not watching his father getting beat. You're watching your father getting beat. Everything is connected, then all of this shit is going to trickle back down onto you. So philosophically, I don't know that it is sustainable to answer Paul's question, but the fact that we're able to have the debate and have the discussion makes it all the more exciting. Hell of an episode. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I cannot wait for the next one. The next one is another event episode. This is not a spoiler. The name of the episode is Mr. and Mrs. John Sacramone Request. Another sentimental season 6 favorite of mine for many, many reasons, but I can't wait to cover it. This season has been a pleasure with you guys. I'm Chris D'Amato.
I'm Paul Mancini.
And I'm Jordan Hugh.
And we will see you next time. Wedding bells are in the air for Mr. and Mrs. John Sacramone Request.
Got myself a girl.